a chair or something. So our best worker, you're going to do a double shift. So I need you to go first and then last. Okay? Alright. So we just need white beads, no more than white beads. Thanks very much. 44 degrees. Okay, think positive thoughts, think posters, think motivation. Just think, maybe. Okay, let's go and see the count. Surely my idea was a good one, right? It cannot be failed.
11.
Oh.
So that's poor. So he's almost gone back to where he was before. So it's gone to his head, right? The idea that his job's safe, he's doing the job twice, it's gone to his head. Okay, I haven't got much hope here. You may do it. Go. Two-handed, look at that. We'll get him mucking around.
Seven.
7. Almost the best we've ever had, but still maybe not good enough. Let's see. So here he comes, the hero, our best worker. Quite tired. Okay, maybe quite tired, but when you go, just like these, otherwise this project will be cancelled. A bit too late. That's what I asked for at the first iteration.
5. Distance.
5, there you go. So he was our best worker, but unfortunately it was a little bit too late, wasn't it? When he worked and he realised that he was job was over prep. Okay, so don't mind looking at the burn down, please. I dare look at it. That's pretty shit, isn't it? Okay, pardon my French. I'm not happy. Okay? So I've gone to speak to the product owner. The product owner has said we're cancelling the project. Right? And I got called in to see my boss, and my boss said we're sacking the workers. Kind of understand. But he's sacking me as well. That's not good because I've delivered lots of projects before. Okay? It wasn't me, it was them. So I'm not happy with that. But thanks very much for running. Can't wait to take you back to them. I'd like to get the credits down there, please. So thanks very much. Okay, thanks guys. So that's the end of the experiment. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is spend the next 10 minutes or so thinking about what the lessons are there that Deming was trying to get across in terms of systems thinking, okay? So, did the motivational things work? You know, did the posters work? Were the incentives a good incentive? Okay? Were the guys constrained by the system? Were they able to innovate? All those kind of things. So you just spend the next 10 minutes or so having a chat amongst the groups, and then we'll ask answers, and then come back and I'll show you some of the things that Deming found all the time that he ran this. Okay? Is that cool, everyone? Alright, cool. So 10 minutes time for you to go to that group and see all that kind of stuff.
I'm hoping I'm not being revelatory, but the only thing that was broken about the whole thing was the actual procedure.
Okay. Alright, so the procedure was maybe broken.
We thought it also a good idea to introduce a marketing campaign around red beads.
Well, so there could be some customers out there for red beads. Maybe some customers want to buy some defective goods. Okay, anybody else? Tools.
If the red beads were bigger,
Why didn't you say that at the time? You just followed orders like a drone.
The mixing part of the process was never questioned.
That's right, because I was not good at it, right? That's right, no, there was no questioning of the process. In fact, if anyone had a question of the process, I would have said just do your jobs. Alright? Because the process has been well documented. It's in my level 5. You can't change that process. So we'll drop down to level 4 before going back up to level 5 again. Anybody else? At the back?
Yeah. The quality control happened after you deliver. So it was already there to check the quality.
That's right. Do you know what Deming called that? Making toast the American way, which was you burn it and I'll scrape. Instead of having quality throughout, we do quality inspection at the end. Anybody else before I show you what Deming is there?
You never changed the fundamental probabilities.
So would you like to explain a little bit more?
Well,
It's always the same number of red beads and white beads that they're all drawing from.
Yeah.
So how does the probability of a white bead or a red bead change on each draw? It does.
Statistically, it doesn't. Okay, so there were 800 red beads in that box. Okay? But statistically, you're going to see that they'll draw around 20 red beads every time. Okay? 20 red beads every time. So some people say, well, why don't we just throw away the red beads? Okay? But in software delivery, for example, if defects are coming back into your system, you don't just throw them away. They happened for a reason. They happened way earlier than you were anticipating. Anybody else? Anything else? So would you like to see what Deming, his main points were? So let's look at this. Deming ran this at his management 3-day seminar. He ran this lots and lots of times. So these were the main ones. So it's the system, not the workers. All right? Completely counterintuitive. When I was a manager of development teams for about 12 years, I was taught it's about the people. All right? One-to-ones, coaching, objectives, appraisals, all about the people. The Deming crew is about the system. So number 2 is management thinking that designing the system. Okay? So at some point someone thought that this process was the best process and now we blindly followed it. Number 3, the arbitrary numerical targets are completely ineffective. So me saying to them 3 or less, 5 or less, 2 or less had no effect whatsoever because these guys were constrained by the system, okay? Constrained by the box and the red beads. Rewarding or punishing had no effect, and yet you see that every day in organisations, especially around things like annual reviews and merits and bonuses and praises and those kind of things. The rigid and precise procedures are not sufficient to produce quality. We had that at the back there. Okay, you want quality throughout rather than at the end. Keeping the best workers didn't work. Now I've worked on software teams where we say the hero is going to save the day. Okay, not all the time. Management tampering creates more problems than it solves. I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Often managers will tamper with the system, it actually makes the system get worse. Alright, so they're constantly tampering, you saw me doing that. Posters and slogans are at best useless and can be insulting. Controversial, I know. I've certainly worked in lots of organisations where they have in touch with your customer and stuff like that. And you say, how often do you speak to customers? I speak to them. Right? So that's something very different. And the biggest source of variation is in the system. So let's quickly talk about variation. Has anyone heard of variation before? And the laws of variation. Okay? Most people aren't trained on this stuff. Most people are trained on variance. So we assume that workers can be accountable for what they do and that we can measure it, okay? But that ignores the theory of variation. So we've got 4 principles. The first one is we expect things to vary, things will always vary, okay? So we need to expect that they always do. So imagine this is a graph of my performance, okay? Up there, doing pretty good. Down here, not so good, all right? This is my performance over time, and you guys are all my manager, all right? I hope not, but you are, okay? So this is my performance up here. So what would you say to me if I perform like that today?
Well done.
Well done, pat on the back. Nice job, Dave.
You can do better, though.
Hey? I would like to work for you, I tell you.
I need to stretch target.
Stretch target. Next day, perform like that. So what would you say to me now?
Could do better.
Could do better. So some people might ignore me, hope it goes away. All right, maybe I was, maybe it's an agile thing. Yeah. Okay.
Fired.
What's the name of your company?
IAG.
Okay, so now I've got performance like that. What would you say now? Okay.
Still fired.
Still fired. Bring me back to find me again. Alright, so there's a downward trend there, right? I'm not actually doing that well. If you plot my performance over time, there is no such thing as a downward trend. Because a number down here is just as likely to occur as a number up there. Okay, there's natural variation in any system. Okay? And what most managers will do in that situation, they'll get me in a room and they'll give me some therapy. And when I was a manager, we were trained to beat people up. Right? Tell them to just do their bloody jobs. Alright, then I went through some more training, which is you can't say that anymore. You have to give them some therapy, okay? So you ask them things like, everything alright at home? Dog alright at home? Cat alright? Family alright? That kind of stuff. But you're working on the 5%, alright? You're not working on the system there. Alright, so Deming showed using a basic statistical formula, and I'll show this in a moment, that you can see whether something's predictable or unpredictable. So you've got these two lines up here, upper control limit and lower control limit. If most of the variation is between those two limits, it's completely predictable. Right? Unless you go and work on the system, you're going to expect that level of variation. So the second principle theory of variation is understanding variation will tell us what to expect. Okay? Most people aren't trained on this sort of stuff. It came out in the 40s in the West. Most people aren't trained on it. So traditionally we look at variance, and this is how I was trained as a manager, and in Agile we talk about yesterday's weather. Okay? So we have one number here, and we have the previous number. Okay? If this number is better than that number, then I've got a smile on my face. If that number is worse than that number, I'll go and beat someone up or probably give them some therapy. Okay? Because I'm not happy with what's going on there. Other people say, no, we don't just look at the last two iterations. We do this, we look at the last three. The last three there look like there's a downward trend, but now we know variation, there is no such thing as that downward trend. Okay? So it's not giving the full picture. So what we can do is, if we find people berating a team who didn't achieve the same number of points as you did the last iteration, it's meaningless, because you're going to get that variation over time. So this is what we call common cause variation, anything between those particular lines there. So this example shows points per iteration over time. Okay? There's natural variation in the number of points that they're achieving. And that's to be expected. People go on holiday, the work, nature of the work will change, we'll get defects come in, all these kind of different things. So instead we want to take an average over time to understand how are we predictably performing over time. Okay? So what we can see here is the next 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 iterations, we're going to get this level of variation unless we go and work on the system. We go and work on the red beads in the box. So managers typically act like this though. This is what they want. They want predictable performance every time, okay? And I've lost count the number of times that I've been in sessions where an IM, iteration manager, scrum master, project manager says, we did 40 points last time, we'll do 40 points this time, okay? That's not taking into account natural variation. So people start gaming the system to make sure that we achieve that number of points. So it's quite easy to explain to people. Let's say you drove into work. It's not going to take you 20 minutes every time. Sometimes it will take you 22, sometimes it will take you 18. Okay? But when we get into work, within our brains time, you would think that that doesn't, your universe does not count in the workplace.